All right, it is Thursday, November 16th, 2023. And folks, you're watching the MMA Eco Live podcast. If it's your first time listening to the podcast, so excited to have you join. Hopefully, this will be a good first listening or watching experience for you. My name is Chris. I'm the owner of MMA Ecosystem, trying to report on Asian MMA, give it a bigger spotlight. But yeah, you can check out my YouTube channel. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this podcast. I'm going to go down the lineup of Asian MMA fights this weekend. There's some really good ones going down in Kazakhstan, some in Japan. And of course, we've got UFC in Las Vegas this weekend, 2 Asian fighters on that card. So I'll cover the schedule and then you can drop questions throughout the show and I will get to those in a second. Having some trouble with my camera focus system here. That's a little bit better. It was running it on manual because the auto was kind of wigging out on me. But anyways, glad you're on here. Let's hop into some of the fights this weekend. We basically, I checked on this One Friday Fight show tomorrow. And you can check out those fights if you want to. I didn't see any Asian MMA fighters on there, so I'll leave that up to you to check out. But otherwise, so going on to Saturday, because I think that is when we're starting to get more Asian MMA events. I'll just hit up a UFC Vegas 82 real quick. At the beginning of this week, we had 1 Asian fighter on the card. Now we have 2. We've got the signing of Myktybek Orolbai uulu, who is from Kyrgyzstan. Very happy to have him in the UFC. Deserving fighter, gone 3-0 in the LFA, and his last fight, a thunderous knockout uppercut KO over his opponent, was a little bit of a switch up of an opponent for him. So not necessarily like the highest level of competition in the LFA, at least in that last fight, but you know, for a short notice opponent, what more could you ask for? He trains out of Team Alpha Male in Sacramento. And I was trying to think, is this the first Kyrgyz male fighter? We know it's not the first Kyrgyz fighter because Valentina Shevchenko is from Kyrgyzstan. But, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky, is I was like, well, technically Rafael Fiziev, when he joined the UFC, is from Kyrgyzstan, but then he kind of switched his identity to be an Azeri fighter out of Azerbaijan. So I don't know what the technicalities are here, but I couldn't think of any other male Kyrgyz fighters. So great news. Just thinking like, if we're thinking that the UFC is going to try to go to Kazakhstan next year, as they were slated to in 2020, they just keep beefing up their pool of potential fighters to fill that card out. So sure, throw a Kyrgyz fighter on there and sign a couple more Kazakh fighters. And a couple of those potential Kazakh fighters I'm going to get to later in today's show because they are competing at Octagon 52 in Almaty this Saturday. But yeah, Myktybek, he is a great wrestler, got great KO power, got I think it's an 11-1-1 record on a pretty solid win streak right now. So he's going to be fighting Uros Medic, who is from Serbia this Saturday in the UFC, opening up the main card on that ESPN Plus main card. And honestly, I haven't really thought too much about like breaking down the fight. I know Orolbai, I mean, he's got incredible KO power. Medic, on the other hand, has fought, 5-6 times in the UFC so far. So he does have that advantage. He does have the advantage of a full training camp. But yeah, I mean, a guy with that much KO power could be really interesting. So yeah, I think looking at more fighters from Kyrgyzstan, looking potentially at fighters from like Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. We've already got a couple fighters, Uzbek fighters from in the UFC. I did see that I think Mahmoud Muradov has a fight scheduled for February 3rd, I believe, in Las Vegas. Trying to remember who. I have all these things written down. Mahmoud Muradov going to be fighting Elyaskhab Khizriev of Russia on February 3rd. And he said that fight is going down in Las Vegas. So potentially your second UFC Apex card of the year, February 3rd, and we could already be looking at 2 Apex cards. So that's a little bit of a bummer for me. I'm just always under the impression that the UFC is going to be traveling more, but by February 3rd, we've already got 2 cards in the Apex. So, although, well, I'll get to that later when we talk about UFC Shanghai. But back to UFC Vegas 82, I did drop a breakdown video of the Jeka Saragih fight against Lucas Alexander. And to very briefly recap that, I think if Jeka can counter the low kicks of Lucas Alexander and maybe meet Lucas Alexander's aggression with a straight right, Jeka's got the KO power to be able to beat anybody. So he's got that. But in a pure technical stance, I think Lucas Alexander is way ahead of him. I think this will be a really tough fight for Jeka. And fortunately, he's had a long time to prepare. Hasn't had a lot of time to prepare for the specific opponent, as it is his 3rd scheduled opponent for this event. But I don't know. I think it's going to be a tough fight for Jeka. I think Lucas Alexander is a future ranked fighter at featherweight. So I think probably he's going to take this by TKO. But seeing as that, given the nature of things, they'll probably give Jeka another shot if he does lose, hopefully against someone more like a Jesse Butler in the future. But yeah, it's an unfortunate situation. You really want to handle Jeka's this UFC fight with a lot of care, and it's unfortunate that he had to go through a lot of opponents and really leveled up each time, getting tougher and tougher opponents. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with that. I'm looking for a lot of fights on this card this weekend. I am definitely looking forward to this UFC card. Looking forward to the Bellator card tomorrow, and I feel like I could probably vent my thoughts for an hour on Bellator and where things are at with that, as it is the only scheduled card for Bellator right now. We have no idea if this is going to be the last Bellator show ever, or if there's going to be 100 more. We have no idea, but I'll be doing Tapology results both for Bellator and for Saturday's UFC event. So really looking forward to catching both those shows live. I would say the best Asian show this weekend is going down in Almaty, Kazakhstan. That is Octagon 52. And let me share my screen with you so you can see this card. I don't know if, I'm not sure who manages Kazakhstan for Tapology, but I think there's a little bit of work to be done on this card on the Tapology page. Because you may notice this Ayan Tursun versus Marina Shutova fight is not just a 3-round fight. It's actually a title fight, as Ayan Tursun is the strawweight champion, and she is defending her belt in the main event of Octagon 52. So that's your main event. You'll see, you see there, she is 4-0. Her competition is slowly getting better. I mean, how good can your competition be? Being a woman fighting on the regional Kazakhstan circuit with less than 5 fights. Probably not exceptional, but it is gradually getting better. I'm not ready to totally say that Ayan Tursun is the next prospect out of Kazakhstan. We need a little bit more time just to see her develop. At the same time, it's for her to really be able to, for us to know if she's ready for the big show, like UFC, we're going to need her to fight somewhere like Brave or UAE Warriors, something where they can extend their pool of potential opponents to be a little bit more high quality. But yeah, definitely something to watch there for sure. I mean, if you're an undefeated woman out of Kazakhstan, automatically, even if you just have 4 fights, you're going to get some eyeballs. So yeah, there's that one. Some really, really good Kazakh prospects on this card as well. 3 that I can just see right off the bat. You'll see probably, honestly, in my top 3 Kazakh prospects. I'm not sure if I would put him at 1 or 2 or 3, but this guy at the top of the page here, Beksat Almakhan, he is 16-1. He's a 26-year-old bantamweight, and honestly, he's he's like exactly following the path of other Kazakh fighters that have been signed to the UFC this year, like Azat Maksum and also Orolbai. So yeah, he's not a champion, and I feel like they're just kind of handing him high-level opponents until that UFC deal comes together. But he is fighting this Brazilian guy, Jan Faraz, 15-5 record. And yeah, I got to think, like, let me just show you this guy's record. Got to think he's going to be the next Kazakh. I would think, like, yeah, I don't think there's anyone ahead of him in terms of who I would sign from Kazakhstan. It may be just like a managerial thing and connections, but you see his record here. I mean, his last like 5 fights, pretty much all finishes against fighters that have anywhere between like 13 and 20 some fights. So really high level of competition. He's fought for UAE Warriors, MMA series in Russia, a lot of times for Octagon. So, I mean, yeah, there's really nothing left to prove for a guy like Bekzat Almakan, except for him just to beat this guy in front of him this weekend. I don't know what else he would want. So he is on the card. Looking forward to that fight a lot. Probably like, yeah, the prospect to watch this weekend. You've also got this guy, Erkin Dermanov. He's a pretty good fighter that was on a win streak that was recently broken at UAE Warriors. He's fighting this other pretty good Russian fighter, Khamzat Chapanov. That's definitely a fight to watch at welterweight. And then here you have Damir Tolanov, who was a prospect that a lot of people were pretty high on for a while. He was undefeated at 10-0. And then in his last fight, he fought a Brazilian guy, Clebici Brito, and was submitted by Ru Nikachok in the first round. So kind of a slip up there, but I'm sure if he gets 2 or 3 fights put together, can win those fights. Then he'll be right back in that, like, in the center of a lot of prospect watches. So he's another really good prospect fighting another Brazilian guy against Edson Amorim. But otherwise, yeah, a lot of other great fights to watch. Some pretty good prospects, some very experienced fighters on this Octagon card. So very, very good show coming to you from Kazakhstan this weekend. Also in Kazakhstan, you've also got Alash Pride 91. Not as much of a high, big ticket show. You do have a, let me see here, not a flyweight, no, sorry. The interim featherweight belt between Bekzat Jesiah, who's 4-0 against David Jabilov. Otherwise, mostly fighters with less experience, but that is going down on Sunday. And then, sorry, let me hop back to the screen here. So, yeah, other than that, JCK does have an event this weekend, this Saturday. They are going to Fujian province to a city called Zhengzhou. Why that is interesting is because JCK never travels. They always have their events in their headquarters in Shanxi province. So I'm curious to see, is this the beginning of something, a new initiative by JCK to try and travel around a lot more and grow their fan base with more live events? Very good idea. I mean, so many, yeah, what is it? China has like 100 cities with 1 million or more people. So like, I feel like there is a massive opportunity in China right now to have way more bigger MMA shows in the country. That, I mean, yeah, talk about an underserved population in terms of live MMA. China might be the biggest. So JCK needs to get on that. I know WLF is doing that a little bit too. They kind of split. They're mostly in their at their headquarters in Zhengzhou, but I'm interested in that. The card is decent this Saturday. No title fights. That'll have to wait until next week for the bantamweight title fight. But a couple good prospects. You've got Zhao Zhikang fighting Hubulan Jeka, who is a Kazakh Chinese fighter out of China top team. That's in the main event. Zhao Zhikang, pretty good prospect. You've also got Aiding Tuahata Arbieka. Oh, man. That's a mouthful. He is fighting in the co-main against Gao Junier. Otherwise, pretty standard fight. Of all people, you've got Kushal Vyas, an Indian fighter, making an appearance on the card. Kind of strange there. Hulan Bate-Ali, another Kazakh Chinese guy. Cards opening up with two women's strawweight fights. So you probably haven't heard of either of these fighters. Kind of some of them making their debut, but yeah, that goes down on Saturday. Let me just see if there's anything else. Black Combat has a show. Shooto has a show. And in that show, I'll highlight Wataru Yamauchi, who's a 6-0 flyweight fighter. He's fighting Joe Arai. That is a really, really good fight. Honestly, one of outside of like Ryzen and other like really big shows that hold shows in Japan, this is honestly one of like the best fights that you could make in Japan right now. Wataru Yamauchi versus Joe Arai. Also got Kao Uno on the card, who's like one of the very first lightweight fighters in the UFC. I think he's like in his upper 40s, which is surprising. I thought he'd be older. That's kind of insane to me. But he is fighting on the card. You got Emi Fujino versus Megumi Sugimoto, women's veteran fight on there. And then speaking of Japanese WMMA, you've got Deep Jewels 43 going down this, what is that, the 22nd? Wednesday. Very interesting time. That's going down in Tokyo. And on that card, in the main event for the interim strawweight title in Deep Jewels, you've got Machi Fukuda, who a lot of people are starting to hail as a next big both women's prospect and overall Japanese prospect. She is 4-0. She's fought for one championship already and Ryzen, I believe. And she's just 4-0. She's fighting 3-0 Arisa Matsuda. So a lot of eyes probably going to go on this fight. Fukuda has fought really good competition in all four of her four MMA fights so far. So a lot of people watching her to kind of see, is she going to be the next breakout star out of Japan, kind of following in the footsteps of like Seika Izawa. So that could be interesting. Man, wouldn't that be great if we could get like Seika Izawa versus someone like Fukuda maybe like a year down the line? That would be great. All of the like high level, atom weight, straw weight fight, women's fights that we can get out of Japan, the better, for sure. I mean, like the Road to UFC, they tried to put together a women's bracket this year, but just couldn't fill it out. And so like that was when that was going on, I was still managing fighters, and we were just like looking high and low for any women's fighter that we could sign to our management agency to try and get to Road to UFC, because they just couldn't fill it out. I think they were trying to go for flyweight, which was a little bit of an odd choice. Strawweight seems like it would have been the best choice, but probably to accommodate a couple of couple fighters that they really, really wanted in there. But yeah, so Deep Jewels going down this Wednesday from Tokyo. That wraps up the schedule portion. Let's talk just about some Asian MMA news, because I know there's potentially already some questions in the chat about UFC Shanghai. That's the biggest Asian MMA news this week. And I saw Shu Harata post that, who manages probably more Japanese fighters, high ticket Japanese fighters than anybody. He posted that on Twitter yesterday, and I was like, are you sure? Like, really? I thought that the UFC announced it. They hadn't started selling tickets yet, but I thought that there was nothing left to resolve there. But then, Aaron Bronstetter confirmed the report, and I started seeing and hearing from fighters and managers that, it is in fact being moved to Las Vegas on December 9th. The Zhang Mingyang versus Brenton Tibiero fight is canceled due to visa issues. So a total huge mess. All the Road to UFC fights postponed, likely because of visa stuff, getting visas, and that short of amount of time. At this point, it's 3 weeks away. So that would just be kind of a mess to try and do that. John Hyung Ko, good colleague of mine, reporting that most likely those Road to UFC fights will be pushed into next year, most likely on like a probably like another Vegas card. I'm wondering because if you think about it, that first January card on January 13th, basically full from the Apex. So I'm wondering, probably, if I'm just guessing, you're going to see those Road to UFC fights on that February 3rd card in Las Vegas. That one does not have a main event, but it is starting to add a number of fights. So let me just look at who's on that. Yeah, there's still plenty of space on that February 3rd card. I'm seeing we still need a main event and what is that, seven slots if we're going for 13 fights on that February 3rd card. So that would be my guess. I do know that there is a card for February 10th. I don't know anything about location for that card, but it would surprise me if the UFC went to Vegas back-to-back weekends on February 3rd and the 10th after already going to Vegas on January 13th. So as far as why the card was moved, I have not heard anything solid on that. I've asked around, and some people that I talked to were either silent on it or were even like, yeah, we were told by the UFC not to talk to any media. We're not allowed to say anything about it, but yes, it is being moved. So yeah, it's unfortunate. I am really disappointed in that. I feel really bad, mostly for the fans that either had already purchased travel accommodations or the fighters that were, especially Chinese fighters that were really looking forward to it. It's just a huge bummer. I also feel like frustrated by it because we already had one East Asian card this year that was supposed to go down in Seoul, canceled, and that was just because Korean Zombie couldn't make that fight to be in the main event. And of course, the UFC never formally announced that card, but everything else was pretty much done except for Korean Zombie being in the main event. They had to move that to Las Vegas. This one they did formally announce, but are having to move. What I've like, the only thing I have to go off of why it was canceled, I've seen some things out there about like it was an issue with the venue. I couldn't exactly fully understand. There's some things I couldn't exactly like because of language and translation, I couldn't fully understand. It sounded like it was some just red tape kind of stuff with either the venue or like holding an event there. I couldn't totally understand, but at first I wondered if it was maybe an issue with like Chris Gutierrez getting a visa to China, because that would be the only reason I would think that, I mean, because I'm thinking if they've signed a contract at the arena, then all the red tape of holding an event there has been cleared. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, Chris Gutierrez, they got him kind of at last minute after exhausting all their other options for a main event for Song Yadong. But yeah, so if he couldn't make the fight because of a visa issue, then yeah, I could see why they would want to move it to the States to have some kind of main event that they could hold. Although I did even hear that there is a potential option of like having Magomed Ankalaev versus Johnny Walker as the main event. I think I did hear John Kavanaugh say that, or Johnny Walker say that this week, that was an option. Of course, that fight is now the main event of the January 13th show. But yeah, I don't know what happened there. I think I'm frustrated because this has happened twice this year. I'm just like, why did all of this feel so last minute? Like they had the date kind of like penciled in for December 9th for a long time, but at least like getting the fights together, putting a card together, everything that needs to be done. Why are these things falling apart 3 weeks before the event? You all are the UFC. You all have already had this calendar where you hold 40 shows a year all around the world. You've had shows in China before several times. Why is this happening? Why can we not figure these things out like 6 months in advance? That's what I think I'm really frustrated about. Of course, I don't know exactly what went on. Otherwise, the UFC is a really professional company. This never happens to them. the only other time I can think of where they had to like move an event last minute, besides Seoul, was when the John Jones thing, where they had to move the fight from Vegas to LA. What was that for, like the new end of year show? And I don't know, 2018 or 19. That was on like a couple weeks notice. But yeah, they never have to do this. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens to this card. I mean, is this going to be a card with like 8 fights on it? Because that's what how many fights do we have at least confirmed? We don't know. There might be more fights that fall off. So we have Song versus Chris Gutierrez. No danger there because both guys are already in the States. Yeah, a lot of these fighters, of course, half the card are not Asian fighters from Brazil or Australia. So I don't foresee an issue with a lot of these guys, but so road to UFC fights postponed. Even a lot of these Chinese fighters are either training stateside or like in Thailand, like Song Kanan. He's in Phuket right now. A couple Korean guys, Park Sung-hyung and Park Jun-yong, fighting or training out of Korea. So who knows? I mean, I listened to John Hyun Ko interview Jong Min Young earlier this week, and he was talking about this crazy process of trying to get his visa renewed. So I know he's had some issues with visa. That's no surprise that fight is off. But so yeah, if you take off those road UFC fights, how many fights do we have left? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Gosh, we've got 7 fights for this card. Are they really going to have a 7-fight card out of Vegas at like, are they going to keep the same time to keep it for Chinese fans? Starting at 1 a.m. It was going to start at 1 a.m. here in the Pacific. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe just ask around the roster to see if anybody wants a fight, like a last-minute fight. Too bad. Hopefully I hope that they're already like, if I were the UFC, I'd be like, okay, now we're shooting to go back to China in May or June, and let's like get everything locked down. I don't know why I don't know if it was an issue with the Shanghai indoor stadium. I was always perplexed why they didn't go to the Mercedes-Benz arena, since that was a much bigger arena that they had already been to before. I don't know. Maybe it was just a booking thing. Who knows? But there you have it. I'm still asking around, trying to get more info on this, but it is a shame. Sorry to all the Chinese fans. Sorry to all the Chinese fighters. Man, when I look at this card, there was so much, no like huge names, but a lot of great action for the Chinese fans. How many? You had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Chinese fighters on the card. You had Li Kai-Wen versus Yi Jia, China versus China fight. Man, really a bummer. I don't know. Maybe if I were the UFC, I would just hold these finals cards, these finals fights, just have them at the Performance Institute in Shanghai, and get as many fans in there as you can. Maybe throw a couple UFC fights on there, have a little compact card, and that would be great. I think that would be. I think that would have been a great plan B, for sure. Even if it's the December 9th show, I don't know. Anyways, moving on. Let's see what happens with UFC Shanghai. Aside from that Asian MMA news, I'll get to your questions. I'm trying not to run too long here, but aside from that Asian MMA news, we've got the Brave show next weekend. That card was announced. Some interesting, not very many like well-known Indonesian names going down in Jakarta, but some names on there that could be exciting. We've got Macho Camacho Fajar on there. That should be exciting. Of course, I broke his fight and the other fight. I would say some good Filipino prospects on there. Just pulling up that card. Kenneth Moningat versus Fajar Macho. Wendry Patalima getting his 3rd opponent for that fight against Marjan Manahan out of Philippines. Ruel Panyales, interesting Filipino prospect fighting Mao Jinbing out of China. That's kind of weird that they brought in Mao Jinbing, but also you've got a rematch between Vincent Majid against Ganbayar Tumarkayag out of Mongolia. That should be good. And then the prelims, honestly, a lot of Indonesian fighters making their pro debut. So I'll be interested in that show as well. You've also got a couple Indonesian fighters fighting Cage Warriors next week. Of course, I'll get to all this next week, but some exciting things going on in Indonesia next week for sure. Next weekend, by the way, yeah, really big weekend for Asian MMA. WLF, JCK Kings, Brave, Cage Warriors, lots of good things going on. So we will get to all that next week, but for now, let us take your questions. Of course, some of these questions, I'm sure I can already see. Yeah, asking about UFC Shanghai. Hopefully, I covered that extensively. Really unhappy regarding, you said UFC Shenzhen. It's actually Shanghai, but I know friends from Shenzhen that took time off to buy tickets for that event. Is that true that UFC didn't get a governmental permit improved? I think, yeah. I don't, just to reiterate, I think it was something like that. It was something governmental, bureaucratic, that they didn't get approved. I'm trying to ask around on that. Maybe I'll try to ask around some of my Chinese friends that also speak English pretty well, and maybe they can explain the situation to me. But that is what I have heard. Yes, I know. The groups that I am in on WeChat, people were pretty ticked about it. People had already bought train tickets, all that stuff. So sorry. Yeah, the Yaroslav Amosov of taking Oliver. Oh my goodness, you almost got me on that, Rain. Clever pun done. That's my question. I'm going to try not to be Michael Bisping every week, but I appreciate that pun. What are your clothes on outdoor MMA events like at Wembley Stadium that Chaudhry was talking? Was Chaudhry talking about doing Wembley Stadium? I think you're about 20 years away from doing Wembley Stadium, Chaudhry. Like, you did a 6,000 person show in Broomfield, Colorado. Probably a little bit before you can have a like 80,000 person event outdoor in London. So let's cool our jets a little bit. Maybe I need to check in on what he was talking about. But yeah, outdoor events, I do think I like outdoor events. It's not so much the outside factor of them. I think as long as you have them in a time of year where the weather is pretty predictable, most cities will have like a time of year when you can pretty much predict that the weather is going to be pretty fair. Like here in Portland, if you were to have an outdoor event in July or September, most likely it's going to be sunny, nice weather. But yeah, I think having a retractable roof is an option. I was listening to, Pete Carroll, Errol Hawani, and Chuck Mendenhall, their podcast today. I think Pete Carroll was talking about somewhere in England, they're building a big outdoor stadium with a retractable roof. So yeah, I mean, we say all of this with UFC Shanghai in our rear view mirror, but UFC really likes to have assurance that they can have an event and that there's going to be no issues with it. So that's the issue. My issue mostly is that large soccer style stadiums are not really the best venue for watching MMA. It's great to have a whole field and like 30 guys running around, but having 2 men or women in a small cage in the middle is just like, it's tough. Even like basketball, having nosebleed seats at a basketball arena, I would say is not the ideal viewing experience for MMA. I've been to several UFC shows, and I feel like the best MMA viewing experience is like a very small, like 2,000 seat indoor venue. That's the best, all the best experiences that I've had with MMA. And Grant, like, yeah, I've been to UFC title fights. There's something special about that. But I feel like all of my favorite events that I've been to have been like really small places where even if you have the worst seats, you're still like looking right down on the action. And you don't, I think that if you have to watch a screen while you're in the arena, it is not optimal. You should be able to watch an MMA event without having to look at a screen. Otherwise, why aren't you just watching this on your big screen TV at home or using a projector? That's my personal opinion. That's why I love going to Invicta so much. That's why I love going to, like I went to a World Series of Fighting event, went to a, I've been to Strikeforce, I've been to Bellator. I went to a Titan FC event in Kansas City that was in the same venue that Invicta used for a long time. And those were really, really fun events. Those were like the most fun that I had. Just because you're a lot of times in this balcony, like looking straight down, almost like straight down at the action. There's no cage blocking your view. It's awesome. So that like going to like this 80,000 seat stadium where like you cannot, there's no way you can reasonably like with your own eyes see the action, what's going on. You have to look at a screen. I don't know. They've tried that in Australia. They had a big show in Toronto back in 2010. Maybe that was 2009. I think that was 2009. But that's what I think. I'm curious if any of you all have ever been to one of those big shows, what your thoughts are. Do I know about MMA Orbit? Yeah, I do. They plagiarize Aaron Bronstedter's tweets and don't give him credit. Has MMA Orbit ever plagiarized your work, and how do you feel about it? They have not plagiarized my work. They have credited me. I think it's Logan Offord is the guy that runs that account. And I've like DM'd with him. We're on good terms, and he's never done anything out of line with my work before. Usually he'll like quote, he'll tag me if I report news. But yeah, I mean, that's again, I say this all the time. It's like you have people attempting to get into a profession where there's no barrier to entry. There's no degree required. There's no test examination. Anybody can just start an account, including me. I mean, that's what I'm doing. I'm literally doing that. So yeah, I mean, there's nothing stopping people from doing that. And I don't love it. They'll literally like copy and paste. Even if it's not breaking news, they will still like copy and paste that. Yeah, hopefully they learn from Logan, and if there's anyone else that runs that account, hopefully they learn from it. Hopefully they grow. I'm not ready to write them off forever. I know in my journey there have been things that I have done that are unprofessional, and I've had to learn from it. And trust for me is really important. And so if it means losing engagement, losing scoops, I've had to make that decision. So yeah, hopefully they don't keep doing it for sure. Do I think that X is getting worse as an app or specifically for MMA? Seems like almost everything is engagement bait except for a few MMA accounts that produce good content. I think you're right on that, Sammy. I've definitely, my experience on that app, on that social media service has not improved. In fact, it has gotten worse. I have gotten no less amount of engagement and following from bots. As much as Elon Musk has made it his like sole vendetta to get rid of bots, I would almost say I've gotten more. I feel like I've gotten more bots. So what do you have to say about that, Elon? I feel like you're right. The quality of content. I do not follow anything on Twitter/X outside of MMA. So I really can't speak to anything outside of the like 150 people that I follow. I keep things really, really tight because honestly for me, like, and I enjoyed like when you all reach out to me, that's totally different. But overall, like, I'm not trying to spend my whole day on this app or else I'm going to go crazy. So I have limited who I follow to like pretty much just like personal contacts and news. And I never use the for you or kind of like, yeah, trying to get you to follow accounts that you don't. So I only use the chronological view, and I keep things pretty bare bones because for me, like with social media, I enjoy what I do, and I try to keep it limited, but I'm not trying to like literally just be on my phone all day, just what I need to. So yeah, I can't really speak to like the broader experience, but I have noticed definitely a lot more just like people asking weird polls, weird questions, weird takes, strange content on there for sure. A lot of the like features that were kind of threatened or changes that were threatened, I haven't seen followed through. Like I remember at one time they were saying that they're going to get rid of the ability to block people. And as far as I know, that's still something that you can do on the service. So there might have been enough negative pushback. And I mean, I keep seeing news article after news article that people are dropping off the app. So it's still very much in the air for me. Are they going to get to a point where they actually try and sell it to someone else and then it's salvaged? I'm not ready. I'm both not ready to write off the app as a whole, and which is why I keep using it. I'm also not ready to say it's going to be around forever. So it's just kind of like for the time being, it is still what most people use. And so I'm going to use it. At the same time, like all the news that I post on Twitter or X, I also post on Threads just because I want to like cover both my bases. I have a far bigger following on Threads already, although I get much less engagement. Although that is maybe starting to change a little bit. But no, there's no comparison. I get way more engagement on Twitter or X. So yeah, as far as the experience, like, I mean, let's just look at this weird old app. I know at some point, at many points, he said he wants it to become the everything app, kind of like WeChat is in China. And if it goes that, then I'm just out. Like, literally the only thing I want out of this app is to see the people that I have chosen to follow in chronological order. That is all that I want out of every single social media app. Maybe YouTube's a little bit different, but that is literally all I want. And when they start messing with that, I get frustrated. If it changes drastically to become this everything app, then I'll probably actually leave the app. But so far, they haven't made it bad enough to where I would leave. I don't pay for like a Twitter subscription, so I don't get those extra benefits or whatever. A lot of that I haven't really found myself needing. Social media is just in such a weird place right now. Probably going to change a lot in the next couple of years, especially with all these lawsuits going on in the U.S. I don't know. All you can do as a media member and as a fan is just like use what you like, keep using it, and get ready for things to change. So, sorry, my lighting is continually getting worse because it gets dark really early here, and it's getting dark. So Rio's saying, I've been saying this to Drake Riggs since 2021. Dern is uncoachable since she hasn't improved. That aged pretty well. Why do you think media is still making excuses for her? So Luke Thomas made a 40-minute segment on how Dern could improve after she clearly lost to the inferior Chinese fighter Sean An. What validates my claim is that Weili had a single training camp under Shooto, just like Dern, but Dern learned nothing from him. Is Dern uncoachable in your opinion or not? Man, she's trained at a lot of different places by now, that's for sure. And I thought that she was getting better every fight. Like, I thought that she had started to turn a corner and really start to fit in among the top 10 at strawweight. And her last couple fights, I was like, okay, like, I mean, you have to realize, again, like, this is a pure jiu-jitsu fighter immediately jumping in the deep waters of elite MMA. And it's expected that's going to take a while. it's expected that she's going to have to unlearn some things. There's going to be some barriers. But could she become like a Ryan Hall or a Damian Maia, where she is able to be so good and adapt her jiu-jitsu game to where she doesn't even necessarily need to learn every single thing about all of MMA? Maybe. That's what we were wondering. But yeah, so I was shocked by that performance. I'm with you. I thought she looked noticeably worse last weekend. It seems like she's going through a lot in her personal life. I know you're just like, why do people keep making excuses? And here I am saying that. But like, for Dern, okay, you have to realize, first of all, Jessica Andrade was like the worst. Think of like the worst possible matchup for Mackenzie Dern, and it's Jessica Andrade. But for me, it's always been clear, like for Dern, all you got to do is all you got to do is improve your wrestling. And that's what I was, and she goes to Cejudo, train with Cejudo. I'm like, it's perfect. The Zhang Wei Li effect is going to happen there. Your wrestling is going to get really good, and you're going to be able to take down anyone you fight, and then your jiu-jitsu is just going to be able to shine. That's all you need. That's all you need. You don't need to try and become a striker. You don't need to try and strike with Jessica Andrade, but very strange game plan. I think Mackenzie Dern needs to take some time off. I mean, yeah, I don't know. One thing, it's like we've seen Mackenzie Dern's like athleticism improve. We have really seen that improve. But man, it's like after training with Cejudo and Eddie Cha and Jason Perillo, it's like how can you be that out of place in your striking? How can your footwork be that out of place? How can you overextend yourself on your punches that much against someone like Andrade? I just don't know, like, what's going on. So take some time off, do some extensive tape study, watch your tape back, have multiple people review it and give you feedback. I don't know. I was almost ready to be like, yeah, Dern, if she's able to just like beat Andrade with ease, we might be looking at Dern being one fight away from a title fight, but it was a bad look. That was a big thing this last Saturday that really shocked me. So yeah, I'm with you on that. Oh, okay. No, I see what you're saying here with this question. And I do see what you're saying. By no means am I being racist or bigoted, but have you yourself ever been accused of being a communist just for covering Chinese MMA? I have seen some bad things. The crowd here is laughing at that question too. I have a live audience here. I have seen some bad things when support for a Chinese fighter is given. I have not been, I believe it or not, I have not been accused of being a communist just yet. I think that if my following were to grow, that would improve. No, that's not true. I think I have been accused. As I think back to some like Instagram comments from like a long time ago, yeah, there were some people on there. Anytime that would happen, I mean, I just delete and block the comments. But I don't think my following's quite big enough for like the broader. I still don't think that like the broader MMA fan base is aware that I exist. I think if they were, then I would get a lot more of those. And I'm prepared for those questions. I mean, yeah, it's going to happen. Absolutely. If you, totally. If you show any support for anything Chinese, you're going to get accused of being aligned with the political party, which, I mean, yeah, we know how silly that sounds. We know that that's obviously not true. But yeah, I'm ready. I'm prepared for it. Most of the time, it doesn't bother me. I just delete and block. Yeah, what's your opinion on the content that John Nash and Eric McGracken make? I think it's a unique perspective about MMA from a legal standpoint. Well, yeah, I mean, it's exceptional. I cannot stress how important it is for people that are like not armchair. I'm saying like me, saying it's important for people not like me to understand both the financial and legal side of things. It's invaluable. I mean, it feels like right now there's only one of each of those guys. And like, yeah, if we didn't have Nash and McGracken, what would you know about the UFC antitrust lawsuit right now? What would you know about the UFC's finances aside from bogus Twitter posts with big yellow numbers claiming fighter payouts? Like, you wouldn't know anything. You would know a lot less, especially with U.S. state athletic commissions choosing to lobby against the fighters and not release payouts from events. So I love it. I definitely consume a lot of that content. I listen to John Nash's podcast often. Follow both those guys on social media for sure. I would highly recommend if you haven't checked them out. Saying Weili was going to be at that China fight night, and people were excited to meet her there. Do you find it all that people were excited, even if, whoa, I mean, yeah, she's the biggest star in China right now, bar none. So for sure. And she travels a lot, so she's not always in China either, for sure. DK asking Shara Magomedov, asking me my opinion. I need to see more from him. We saw a really good fight against Bruno Silva. He looked really good. His kicking game is absolutely ridiculous, but we need to see more. I was secretly hoping that we would see him, that the UFC would book him on the Shanghai card against maybe even like a top, like, I don't know, someone close to the top 15 or just at the bottom of the top 15. I would have loved that. Need to see more of him though. I mean, he is an odd individual personally. His attitude is very, very odd, going from attacking people who show PDA in public. That's a little bit of a redundancy, but and kicking the guy in the jiu-jitsu tournament. But other than that, exceptionally talented from everything that I can see. I would think you'll probably see him at like the Saudi Arabia card next March. Seems like a shoe-in for that card. So yeah, I am excited. What I'm excited about is just he's an exciting guy. I don't see his fights ever becoming boring. So honestly, it feels kind of like we're seeing him follow in the footsteps of like a Khamzat Chimaev. Almost a very different skill set, but a lot of those same vibes is what I'm getting early on in Shara Magomedov. So I'm excited. Yeah, excited to see more. What's your opinion on looking at or respect for MMA in general? Is it fighters, former fighters, even analyst accounts? What opinion do you like looking at? Oh, okay. Sorry. Gosh, I'm going cross-eyed. Whose opinion do you like looking at? Yeah, so I get Luke Thomas. I get, like you said, John Nash, Eric McGracken. I listened to Hawani's podcast, it's The Ringer, with him, Pete Carroll, and Chuck Mindenhall. I feel like they're a great trio. They know so much about MMA, and a lot of different angles. So I like those guys a lot. I really don't. I mean, there's definitely more out there. Right now, I don't spend a whole lot of time looking at like really analytical, like breakdown kind of stuff, which I do need to do more of. But yeah, I would say, and you all have recommended some of those people to me before, so I know where to go if I were to ever do that, which I do need to do that. But you only have so much time in a day, only so many podcasts that you can reasonably listen to. But yeah, I haven't been doing much like MMA Hour. Sometimes I'll look at some clips from MMA Hour on the MMA Fighting YouTube channel, but I think people to me that like feel like experts even if their personality might rub some people the wrong way, but people that feel really like experts to me is who I go to. So, I mean, Helwani, it's like there might be some things that rub you the wrong way about him. And there's a few of those things for me too. But at the same time, he has been embedded so deeply in MMA for so long. And he has interactions with everybody, even from like Dana White and Ali Abdelaziz, people that have kind of blacklisted him. He's still like, he just knows, he has his hands so deep everywhere. So I do like just hearing his perspective on things. So that's who I'd say. Yeah. Chaudhry mentioned Liam Harrison or Tawanchai versus Jonathan Hegarty for Wembley. Yeah, I just don't know. I know that would be big, but like, is that big for? Wembley's in London, right? I'm just like, is that really the fight that you would try to go to London with? Like, is Hegarty really that big of a star there? I mean, before you go to Wembley, try to go to at the very least like the O2. The O2 seems too big for one championship right now. Again, they went to a 6,000 seat arena in Broomfield, Colorado, and gave away like thousands of comp tickets for that. So they have a lot of room to grow in their live audience in the Western market. They could probably get there someday. I do think they could get there someday, but I think that's a little bit ambitious right now. That is interesting. Before I get to, did I enjoy Josh Van's body shot clinic? I totally did. Love that. Tagged you on. Oh yeah. Josh Van, future ranked fighter at flyweight. Absolutely. Maybe too early to say future champion, but definitely future ranked fighter. Probably like top 5, I would say. He looks exceptional. 22 years old and looked amazing in 2 UFC fights. Let's put him against someone kind of like Tetsuro Taira's level, kind of just like right outside. I don't know. I don't think it's too early to test him against someone just outside the top 15, just to see where he's at, if he can hang. Do you think Ryzen should adopt Ryzen Landmark where they use the cage full time? Do you find it weird that they have copied one by having both the cage and the ring? I don't know if they copied. I don't know who did it first. Ryzen's been doing when did Ryzen start? Like 2015 or so? I don't remember when Ryzen started, but yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, you all know how I feel about. I think I've covered ring versus cage before. Ring, better viewing experience for the audience. Cage, better for MMA, more standard across MMA. But with one, they're never going to go back to using the cage fully, I think, because they have the Lumpini Stadium deal, because they have kickboxing and Muay Thai so big with one. So I feel like there is just something historic about Japan and the ring. Like, something almost feels off to have a cage at a Japanese MMA fight. And I'm not saying that I prefer the ring more, but I think it is just like this cultural combination. It's just like, yeah, it's almost like you're disrespecting pride by using a cage. So I don't think that they would ever make that switch full time. I think that would be met with some negative backlash. At least while Ryzen is most. Now they had that show in Baku a few weeks ago, but as long as Ryzen is mostly a Japanese promotion, I don't see them ever making that transition full time. Yeah. Hey, we got Ghost on here. While you're answering Sammy's question about X, I hope my content doesn't. Oh, dude, you are not the problem on X. No. Just because I make MMA study threads now, just plus the occasion. No. You are not the problem. You are on the other end of things of like high quality content. You're putting things out there that are of good quality. I'm mostly talking about just like really weird, like almost like spammy things. So no, yeah, and folks asking like about MMA opinions, like yours is definitely one of the ones I respect for sure about as far as like breakdowns. Got some hellos to Ghost. Oh, really love Ghost on here, don't you? Yeah. Yep. Totally. Do I think Malcolm Gordon or even Sumudarji for Josh Van? I think Sumudarji is maybe like 2 or 3 steps ahead of where Josh Van is at. Sumudarji's been fighting. He's been ranked for a while and fighting kind of in the lower end of top 15 for a while. So he is fighting Alan Nascimento. At least we hope he should be, because he's been in Sacramento. Shouldn't be any problem with that with that fight. So yeah, Nascimento versus Sumudarji. Nascimento unranked. I think Josh Van has a little bit farther before he gets to that level. Malcolm Gordon, I think Gordon does have a fight booked. Is he fighting in Toronto? Is that right? Yeah, he's fighting Jimmy Flick in Toronto. That level, I feel like Gordon is maybe like one. These are the most arbitrary levels I'm thinking of, but I feel like Gordon is maybe 1 or 2 levels ahead of Josh Van. Okay, let's just see. Let's match make for Josh Van real quick. Pulling up the whole flyweight division here. Ooh. What about like Jake Hadley? That could be really fun. Even though we just lost, I could see them doing like a Alessandro Costa, just because he's a really athletic guy, fairly well-rounded. Those 2 Kazakh guys, Almabayev and Maxim, maybe a little bit too much. I would love to see Jake Hadley. Would be really cool. I think that's the best one I can think of. Bruno Silva could be interesting. But yeah, I think 2 more fights outside of it depends. It depends on how the first one goes, but ordinarily I would say 2 more fights outside the top 15. Give me like a Jake Hadley or Tetsuro Taira would be my choices. Oh man, Charles Johnson, could you imagine that? That would be a lot of fun. I mean, gosh, flyweight. The thing is with flyweight is there are very few boring flyweights. I'm looking at this roster. There are so few boring flyweights that really like any fight would get me excited, for sure. Remember me and Jimmy raving about Van back in the early days of the podcast, so I appreciate the matchmaking. Sure, yeah. Yeah, really excited about. I need to do an interview with Josh Van because we've been connected for a while, but I'd love to interview him. I feel like whenever I post content on Josh Van, even though he has a smaller social media following, everything I post always gets a ton of engagement, and which just tells me that my audience really enjoys Josh Van, is a big fan of him. So I think that'd be really cool. Speaking of interviews, I may have some interviews for you next week even. I'm working with some guys from Brave about getting maybe some Indonesian fighters to interview, so that could be interesting. But yeah, hopefully next week I may have a few of those. I know I hardly ever do interviews. I need to get more reps. It's always available for me. The reason I don't do as much interviews is just because there's always so many opportunities out there, and just a few things that I can really give my time to. And like getting better at YouTube video editing is something that I've set my hand to. Photo editing, just managing social media. There's one bigger project that I've kind of been working on for a couple weeks now that I may unroll in the by the end of the year. That would pretty drastically change kind of the flow of everything I do in a really positive way. No negatives there. So I'm working on that. But interviews, yeah, there's and just to let you know a few more things. Next year, I've tentatively, I'm not even going to tell you what they are because they're still very, very rough draft, but I'm thinking about taking 2 trips next year. And one would hopefully be like Q1 next year in the US. And then hopefully like Q3 in the fall would potentially be international, but like trying to put some actual skin to these plans and starting to try to make them a reality. But those would be work trips that I would go to spend time with Asian athletes and get more reps interviewing. So yeah, I do realize, I do kind of feel that need to get a couple more. I've done, I don't know how many, 7 or 8 interviews by now. So a couple more would be good. So maybe we'll have Josh Van on at some point. I feel like we can make that happen if he's up for it. But that's all I got for you guys today. Next week, we've got a big show. Of course, no UFC next weekend because it's Thanksgiving, but we've got like PFL championships. Watch my guy Kai Wu fighting there. He's a good friend of mine. Also, you got, yeah, a lot of great stuff next weekend. You got the Brave show in Jakarta. Not necessarily like a lot of huge names on there, but a lot of Indonesian fighters. So that's cool that they're getting a big stage. Next week, you've got, there's a deep card. Of course, Deep Jewels. Got JCK Kings. That should be a great card. WLF. I am seeing that there's a card next weekend. Their 70th MMA show. Cage Warriors in Newcastle, England. Got 3 Indonesian fighters on there. So a lot of good stuff going around, especially in Indonesia. But in the meantime, enjoy the fights this weekend. Enjoy Jeka's debut, Myktybek Orolbai's debut, and everything else going on in Kazakhstan and around the world. But for me in Portland,